Hello, everyone. It's me, the Boss Hog, and today we're going live and unscripted and everything else with episode one of our new series, Thanksgiving. So, as I've remarked, I've introduced a couple of new series. One of which I'm doing is just to have a grumble about something that annoys me. This one, though, is to basically give thanks or be appreciative or just kind of share and think about something that makes me happy and be appreciative. And so I thought quite hard about what my first episode would be. Originally, I thought it was going to be on my wife, who I've known for like 12 years and definitely helped me become a better person. But actually, I think my mum is a more appropriate person, at least in part because thanks to my mum, I became the kind of man that would be attractive to my wife. And to be honest, no other single person has had as much impact on my life as my mum. My mum passed away about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and definitely it was more of a challenge than I realized at the time to kind of get over that. I had some challenges at work and rushed back much sooner than I should have done, and didn't really take the required time out to properly mourn, I guess, for want of a better word. Like both my parents are no longer here, but I was always a lot close to my mum, and my dad was ill toward the end of his life, so I was never as close to my dad as I was to my mum. And I guess that's probably a good way to start as to why I'm thankful, because I think both my mum and I reacted as well as we could to my father getting ill, and among other consequences that happened is that I became a man probably sooner than I should have done. um, but also it meant that I was treated like an adult by my mum. Like I can remember helping my mum with like budgeting. It made me really happy when I started earning to be able to contribute toward family meals, rent, that kind of stuff as well. um, and like my mum always treated me like an adult first. Maybe that also helped me grow up, to be honest with you. I think though, another reason, and probably the biggest reason why I am where I am today, is because my mother fought really hard to get me into a good school. Like I grew up on a pretty average to quite poor, really, council estate. I know what happened to about a third of my junior school that I was in the class with, and of those 10 people, three of them are dead. And especially the saddest point is that the cleverest person in our school is one of those people. He got addicted to heroin and basically gave himself an overdose. And my mum begged his mum to get him into a good school, right? Like, he was so clever that somebody would have given him a bursary or an opportunity, right? She just wasn't interested. And whereas my mum, from when I was like 7, she was kind of she was like doing the whip round, getting my teachers to send letters, getting my headmasters to send letters. And in the end, my mum got me like a 95% bursary into a private school. It was a military school as well. My dad had served in the army, which kind of helped me stand out, I guess. And the school I went to, they looked at my mum's finances, and they basically said, well, we think you can pay about 4% of the school fees. That's what we're going to ask for you to pay, because we think it's a reasonable amount, and basically you can have the rest free. So, but my mum put in a lot of effort and work, and because like my mum was quite humble and uncertain, even when we used to go down to that school, and we'd have like parades and events and things like that. My mum always felt slightly uncomfortable and out of place because she felt like she just didn't belong there, and I always felt it was silly, because I think she felt like she didn't belong there because she didn't have the money or the, I guess, like the social class. But she was a good mum, and I guess like she especially deserved to be there, because she'd put in all this work and everything else. And I mean, the difference between like what I was like before I went to this school and afterwards is just incredible. Like I was definitely going down that path of being like a little shit, to be honest. Like getting into fights, throwing things at cars was like one of the naughty things that in hindsight was really dangerous to do. But I don't really know what I was thinking at the time, right? But when you're like 9, 10, you do these silly things, and that's that, right? I used to get into scraps quite a lot. And like I was on the doorstep of a school that was in special measures already, right? I think it had something like a 9% pass rate and was well known for having a violence problem. And that was my catchment school. And my mum was like, Liam, we're not sending you there. And, so we looked at a few schools. And to be fair, again, maybe this is part of like why I was treated like an adult. Like I actually really wanted to go to this school, mainly from a sports perspective, because it had like all the sports and was really cool from that perspective, and even as like a 7 or 8 year old, my mum was talking to me about options, possibilities, right? What kind of school would you like to go into? We're going to try and get you into the best school we can, right? What's your preference out of these three options, right? Do you have one? What is it? And we really took pains to find it. But like I say, and again, I'm still like a kid, right? I'm just like, oh yeah, I really want to play football. I want to play rugby. It was my mum that like did all the hard work and got the letters written and basically went through I guess a kind of humiliation, having to like go and see the bursar and boards of schools and stuff and basically say, listen, we've got no money, right? Here is our situation, right? Like we can't pay to go here, but my son has potential, right? All these teachers are telling you he's got potential. Do something about it. And, it's like one of those things. I think now that I'm a parent, quite often I let my wife do the day-to-day managing of our relationship. But when it comes to things like finding a nursery, finding a school, I think even my wife was surprised. It was like, because I did it basically, right? I found a nursery and it's not exactly a local nursery. We have to travel, basically do a commute each day. It's a great nursery. And so I was like, this is so important for her formative years. And likewise with her schools, like her school is outstanding across the board, right? Ofsted love it. And I just like, we went there and it felt really good and positive. And I was like, this is where I want to go, right? This is where I want to go. This is where I want to send my daughter. And I think I'm so vested in it, not just because I'm a parent, but because I know the difference that education makes on a trajectory of a life. And, I think I would like to hope that in 30 years time, my daughter is also appreciative that we got her into a great school. And, we put the effort into finding that and, that she becomes a better person because of it. I think as well, the other reasons why I'm thankful is because a lot of things that are important in my life today, I first discovered with my mum. It was my mum that got me into like food and drink as an example, right? Which is a real thing for my wife and I to spend money on. I think the first big experience I can remember is when I was like 19 and I went on board this American cruise ship. And, you normally have to be 21, but they had this policy where if you were over 18 and had your parents' permission, my mum gave me that permission. And one of the things we did is we went on like this wine tasting, like additional thing. And it kind of just blew me away in terms of how different food could taste different with different wines, the different wines that were out there. And it was like $20 a head tasting, right? And it was amazing. Like I still remember it today. That was what's that, 16, 17 years ago now. And most years I used to go back home and kind of like I'd get my mum like Chateau Neuf. It was like her favorite drink, Chateau Neuf de Pape. We'd share a bottle, and like each year that I bought one, I tried to get a slightly better one. It kind of like became her, like what the drink that I most associated with my mum, basically. Whenever I see it on a menu or I order it, it's like hard not to think about my mum, right? And because like food and drink is such an important part of my life and I enjoy it so much, there are like those regular flashbacks that you have. And it's surprising in many ways. It'll just be like little things that I'll just remember randomly, like years later, right? It's like, oh, I'll see some flowers in a shop and my mum would be like, oh, I hate lilies, they're always associated with death. And there'll be like this beautiful bouquet of lilies and I'll be like, kind of just brings back that memory of that line specifically, right? And there's always like these little things as well. Like you make these associations that you're not even aware still sit in your brain, and then suddenly you'll just think of something and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's right. And it's sometimes unexpected, like the way that you will think. And one of the other reasons why I decided to do this video today specifically is it would have been my mum's birthday. And so I decided on Monday to go and buy a very nice bottle of Chateau Neuf. I'll put the link in it for anyone who's interested. And, basically just, it's a nice way to remember. And likewise, actually, like my mum left me a couple of thousand, like she didn't have too much and I have 3 siblings. So I got left like $2,000, and the $2,000 my mum told me had to be split between like a holiday and one of the earliest memories I have is going to Lindos in Greece and just having a good time. So basically when my little one is a bit older to, remember stuff, we're going to have a holiday on my mum, basically, paid for that way. Then I also have to enter a poker tournament that I wouldn't normally enter. So I'm thinking actually of going over to the Czech Republic. They have a really big casino there, and basically just playing in like an all-day tournament, sort of £400 sort of entry. And then I had to also buy a beautiful whiskey. So again, what I will probably be doing probably tomorrow once I'm finished with the wine is I'll be opening or reopening a bottle because I got it last year as well. And basically, this bottle is like 43 years old, and there's only 200 of them ever made. And so it was not a cheap bottle of whiskey, right? So, and again, it was like, that's what my mum told me to spend my money on. So that's what her money that she gave to me. And so that's what I'm going to spend it on, basically. So, yeah, it's like, I guess just trying to like bring this background. I think like I just think it makes me incredibly appreciative because I think my life could have turned out so much different. It's quite incredible. Like I feel very fortunate as an individual, and to say that my life is different to what it was like as a kid is just such a massive understatement. And in a way, like you want to be, or I want to be like, well, I did this, right? I worked hard. Maybe I got a bit lucky as well, but in some degree, at least, I created my own luck, right? But I wouldn't have gone down that journey if I hadn't have been fortunate enough to have a mum that cared so very deeply. And and like my mum made quite a lot of sacrifices, like not just when my dad got ill. My dad got MS, basically. He was in the army and then he was a chef, but he got MS and was progressively unwell. So my mum had to care for him. But like my mum became like quite a mother hen and like ran the house, but not because that was like her personality, right? I don't really think that my mum wanted to be in that position, but she was a pragmatist and like a dutiful woman who knew that her job was to look after her husband as he was ill. She took her marriage vows super seriously. And and part of being that mother and like basically single parent at that time, right? She's still married, but my dad can't do anything, is raising your children, and like I know my mum would always regret decisions that she'd make, like she tried to give us all the same opportunities, but my sisters are very different people to me. So then she'd like double think, like maybe I shouldn't have got them into that same school I got you into, Liam, right? Maybe because they didn't enjoy that structure as much as you did. But she always tried her best, right? And like that was it. Like maybe I did better because I was fortunate, or I responded best to those opportunities, or maybe I just got lucky. Who really knows? But like I think me personally and my sisters as well, like we're all better today than we would have been if it wasn't for my mom. I think that's very clear. And yeah, that's part of it. And also I realized as well, like when I was thinking of things to moan about, right, in terms of grind my gears, there's definitely some philosophical outlooks that I gained from my mum. And I think the big one is the fact, like, I'm so anti-positive discrimination and quotas. And it's because my mum basically was on the receiving end of it. Like, my mum got the best scores in her class, but was denied entry into a better school because the boys were basically given an uplift in their mark to encourage them. Right. So it's basically very similar where, you can score lower in tests, but still get accepted against somebody else who won't be able to go, which I think is manifestly unfair. So I think like in many ways, my mum felt like life gave her a lot of bad rolls of the dice, right? Just like being born maybe a decade or two too early where women were still systematically prejudiced. And, like the fact my dad got ill, my mum was actually married before and a guy died of lung cancer before that was commonly accepted. It was related to smoking. So, my mum basically had to bury two husbands, which must have sucked as well. And it's just, I think she responded not just like admirably, but like, if I'm being really honest, like superbly. It's difficult to do justice to her kind of persistence and yeah, duty and strength. And I think like the fact that I am successful by basically any measure, I guess like what it means to me to be successful is to, have married well, be doing well in my career, be educated, be liked by people that know me. Hopefully that's at least to some degree true. And, be kind of like building on that foundation that she helped give me. And I think, again, considering where we started 30 years ago, that's clearly the case. And yeah, so I think it's important to give thanks because as much as I would like to think that the things I've achieved is because of me, I think it would have not been the case had I not had those opportunities and that kind of loving home. Not just my mum, my dad, the earlier memories I have of my dad, both my parents were good and gave me a loving home. They used to argue in ways you can't imagine, right? Like we had dents in walls where they'd throw things at each other. Very emotionally hot relationship, shall we say. But they loved each other, I think, and they certainly loved us. So it wasn't just my mum that gave me that, but certainly, by the time I was going to school and then I started work, and I would always tell my mum things as well. Like I got a pay rise. One of the last things I got to tell my mum when she was like going slightly doolally was like it was the first bonus I ever got that was 5 figures, and like that sum of money would have been like a year's salary to my mum. My mum was like a care assistant before she had to give up working, and a waitress. It was that kind of number. And like I mentioned it to my mum, and like she was again slightly losing it. She was like, "Wow," and I was just like I don't know quite how much she took in, but I knew before then, the fact that I had this career and I was earning nicely, especially by council estate standards. I know that she took great pride in it, and it always sort of motivated me. And being able to tell her that like a few days before she passed away was amazing. And like I think I hope she would be proud, and I'm definitely like very proud that she was my mum and very fortunate. And that's why I think it's important to give thanks. So I think I've said everything I want to say. I think that's my reflection, and I guess I'd like to just end it on a cheers. Thank you for watching, everyone. I've been the Boss Hog. Bye for now.